Okay, and we're off. So, welcome everyone to the On Air session at the San Francisco Summit, where we have guest hosts today. I am Stephanie Gooch. I am a commercial architect in the optics team. Me and John are branded heavily with our t-shirts on today. And we look at cost optimization, general optimization with customers. And we're going to be chatting to you a bit about that today. And I brought with me my colleague John to chat with you as well.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having us. We're looking forward to talking about EBS.
Yeah, so we are going to be chatting all about EBS and ways that you can optimize, quick wins that you can take away today and implement into your business. And if you enjoy hearing to me and John talk, then please check out the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show that we host every week, which is stories, concepts, and solutions all about how to optimize your bill at AWS. We've got a whole backlog of videos on YouTube, so the QR code is there. So if you're seeing us live at San Francisco and you want to snap a pic and come back later, you'll be able to see us there. But let's jump into it, John. So do you want to explain to people what EBS volumes are?
Sure. Yeah. So we'll take a step back and talk a little bit about storage in general. EBS volumes. This is block storage, and it's really the foundational and most pervasive type of storage that we have out there. And unlike object storage, where we've got metadata that defines the access for it and how we connect back over to those objects. In the block storage world, it's data that's split into evenly sized blocks, and we access it directly based on the address. So really, really fast reads and writes, and used by pretty much every EC2 instance out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll be seeing this if you're a developer. You're probably like, yeah, I know this. This is it's my bread and butter. I always choose EBS. I'm always choosing those volumes to set up. But I think people forget that there's a lot of different types of volumes out there. There's kind of the ones that you set as default. Maybe in your CloudFormation stacks, your Terraform modules, you have a default setup already. And today we're going to chat a bit about maybe what one could be your default. So to expand on that, John, do you want to just go through a couple of the different types that are available and when to use them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our general purpose, EBS volumes. Then we have, high performance volumes. Then we have magnetic media, really designed for capacity and throughput. And today we're going to talk specifically about, some of our general purpose EBS volumes. And I think just to go back a little bit into the history of that. So EBS was launched in 2008. In 2014, we came out with the general purpose gp2 volumes. That was the vast majority of EC2 workloads and EBS workloads were using GP2. And then just most recently in December of 2020 at reInvent, we released the latest generation of GP volumes, and those are the GP3s. And there's something a little bit special about those volumes with GP3. They've decoupled performance from capacity for these types of volumes. So we've got the ability to kind of fine tune the performance and also get a little bit more baseline performance than we did with the GP2 volumes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was exciting times, and the big bit about them in comparison to GP2 is they're 20% cheaper. And I think that was the real sales pitch to a lot of our customers. When we had this in our team, we immediately decided, okay, when I say we, I mean John. John immediately started to say, okay, how do I get my customers this information? And started looking really into that. And our first kind of resource I'm going to share. So we're going to be sharing a lot of resources through this. So the first one is there's a blog post, which is Finding Savings from the 2020 reInvent. And this covers a couple of highlights from that reInvent, but in there is a query you can run on your cost and use report to identify GP2 volumes that would be perfect candidates for a quick win to move to GP3. And we're going to talk a little bit about the caveats around this and why this query is designed the way it is. But just as a resource, if you want to just take that and run, then that's a good place to get started, for sure. So do you want to talk about maybe why people should move to GP2 apart from the reasons, if you have any customer examples that are good?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, one of the reasons why our team, got really focused on, helping folks optimize with GP3 was just because it is so pervasive. If you're running EC2 workloads, you most likely have, a pretty good footprint of, general purpose EBS volumes that are out there. And as Steph mentioned, if you can realize a 20% savings off the capacity, then that has the potential for really driving, a really big impact. And in a lot of cases, folks are actually increasing the performance when they're realizing the cost savings at the same time. So I guess maybe a couple of examples on the details behind that. The baseline random performance on the GP3 volumes is 3,000 IOPS, which is what the old burst performance was on the GP2s. So if you had a use case where you were maybe maxing out those burst credits on a GP2 volume, you're going to get that as the baseline performance on the GP3 volumes when you take advantage of those. And we've helped folks narrow down that focus to, hey, what's a good starting point by looking at some of the use cases where the GP3 volumes are either going to give performance parity or they're going to give an increase in that random performance while also realizing the savings. And without going into too much of the technical details on that, really around 1 terabyte volume size, which is a lot of use cases, boot volumes, anything that we have, really attached over to EC2 that's being used as a volume on that instance. It usually fits within that size capacity. We might have some corner cases where we're using much larger volumes for other workloads, but we cover a lot of workloads with that scenario where they can realize that performance improvement and also realize the savings. So that query is definitely a good one to help narrow down, like, hey, what do I have out there today? What are some of the templates that I'm using to deploy those workloads? And can I go back through and just update those changes and take advantage of GP3 to start to benefit from the savings?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot. That was one of the things when I wrote that was just you told me about it, but when I wrote the query, it made everything like a lot easier in terms of, okay, how do I attack this? How do I have a kind of hit list of ones that I can approach? And what's also great is that you can order that query by the savings you're going to make. So doing that cost comparison, you can say, okay, maybe I have 1,000 EBS volumes that are GP2 at the moment. How do I know that's going to take me ages? Where do I start? And you say, okay, well, these 10 are going to make the biggest impact. They're going to make the most saving. Oh, and I also know that maybe these 20 they're all done from a Terraform module. So I can go in and make that change. So that just gives customers a way to do it quickly. And we're not saying that you can't do ones that are over 1 terabyte. You can, but you just need to be aware that the IOPS are going to be different and you might have to purchase more on top of this. So just to be aware of that. The other one is obviously but there's IO1 to GP3. Do you want to chat a bit about the caveats around that, which we've spoken a lot about in the last week?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the IO1 volumes, it's a slightly different storage class, right? Where we've got different SLAs around performance for those volumes that makes it a little bit different than the general purpose SSDs, the GP2 and GP3. So really important to kind of look at that documentation and figure out what works well for your requirements on your application. Just aside from cost and performance, look at the SLAs that come along with those volumes. But what we see, a lot of folks starting to look at now is like, hey, if I'm running a non-prod environment and maybe I'm using IO1 volumes in my production because of a specific, SLA requirement, something like that, maybe my non-prod, I can use GP3 today, or maybe now that my application's changed in its design and it's more distributed, I can actually use GP volumes instead of the IO1 volumes for that use case. So we got a lot of folks that are kind of doing both of those patterns. They either look in and try to identify where they can take advantage of GP3 in all their environments, prod and non-prod, and then they look for, hey, did anything change with my application where maybe I can reevaluate some of the requirements I had for the volume types and look at alternatives, not use IO1 volumes, use GP3 or GP2.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting that those ones that I see, those are quite expensive. Normally, the savings you make on those ones can be massive.
Yeah, and it's definitely important to look at some of those details around like the sizing for the volumes, because I know we do have folks that are using IO1 for really high performance workloads. They've got 20, 30, 40, 50,000 IOPS per volume.
Yeah.
And you're going to have some limits with GP3 where it won't go quite as high for you there. But if you've got those general purpose use cases, again, just going back to the name, where it's a couple thousand IOPS, that's a good way to get started.
Is it 16,000 was the limit that's on GP3? Is that right?
Right. Yeah. 16,000 IOPS as the upper bound. And then also always important to kind of look at how that IOP is being measured, in terms of block size, and going to use that when we're looking at our workloads too.
Yeah. So again, just like a kind of check those things. It's not an immediate flip on everything, but if we can narrow the field down for you guys, then that's a good starting point. And there's a lab I'm gonna just pop up a link to. So this is the optimization data collector lab, allows you to look across your entire account and your entire estate organization at your your EBS usage. So say you're like really inspired by today, we hope you are, and you want to go out and say, okay, I want to look at all my volumes and I want to start seeing the savings. What am I currently using? How do I track this? You can use this to get like a snapshot in time of the list of volumes that you have and connect it to see how much you could save to GP3, or also bring in things like trusted advisor data. So a big thing we also advocate for is looking at those unattached volumes that you might say, oh, there's a GP2 that I could move to GP3. And then you realize, oh, it's not actually attached to anything. Maybe I should get rid of that.
Yeah, one of the cool things I like about that lab too, we've had folks that run the lab within their environment and they start to identify some patterns where they're, hey, within this environment, 80% of the workloads are coming from just a handful of different, cloud formation templates that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So they can look back at, how those workloads are being deployed and make the change kind of on the front end there with the infrastructure as code instead of going through and making a modification to the running instance.
Yeah, definitely. And the fun thing, so this lab is just basically a data collector. It's we suggest some places in which how to connect the data so that you can create SQL queries in Athena about it. But the visualization is all up to you. So there's some fun things that you could do with it. You can mess around and explore the data. One thing that we did the other day was look at the creation time of the volumes. So I hadn't even thought to do that. And then especially when we were looking things that were like unattached, you could say, wow, something happened on this day back in 2020 and loads of volumes came unattached. Like we haven't cleaned them up since then. Let's have a look. Or kind of on the flip side, if there's stuff that's being created, new workloads that are happening that don't really have maybe that much storage, like they're not utilized that much at the moment, maybe they'd be good candidates for you to flip over to GP3 because they are so new. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, and you reminded me too, Steph, of another customer experience where we were looking at exactly that, the creation time for the volumes, and a lot of those IO1 volumes they had were a few years old, and we just started to look at it a little bit more closely and say, hey, were these instances and volumes using IO1 because of a specific characteristic of the volume type, or is this something where maybe you had started using it because it was the best option at the time, but haven't had an opportunity to kind of reevaluate the new offerings out there? And in that case, they said it was the latter. They said, we had been using this before, worked great for us. We actually hadn't thought about reevaluating some of the design decisions, but looking back through the list of what they get as an output from the data collection exercise, you can start asking those questions, these volumes that have been around for a while. Is there a better fit, something that's new that would help to reduce cost? And in those cases, those customers were saving, 70, 80, 90% off of the IO1 equivalent when they were able to meet their performance requirements with GP3. So really, really impressive savings in those situations.
Yeah, that's really interesting that they can actually dive into that and have a look at it. And I'm glad that people are using the lab for that kind of activity. It's good, and that's interesting. That concept of they hadn't gone backwards to look at things. I think that's quite a common occurrence with the cloud. It's not that new anymore. I think people still think it's like a new concept, but Amazon's been around for a while now, and so people do have volumes that have been created in 2011 or something that are still there. And so taking that time to look back at what you've currently got and kind of be improved, like the cloud is not static, it's flexible. New things come out all the time. Can you look back and say maybe we should improve this and review stuff? And it's interesting you mentioned that, because that's a key point I'm going to be making in my London summit talk about cloud ops, the building blocks of cloud ops. So if anybody who is at the San Francisco summit is then coming to the London summit, first of all, well done you for going to more than one, but come see me and talk about that kind of stuff and have any questions. And I think just to throw this in there now, if anyone has questions about the subject, we have cost optimization at amazon.com is our Twitch show email address. So if you're interested and want to get hold of me and John, that's how you do it. So maybe just like last couple of points, are there any other big customer stories you wanted to share before we maybe do a kind of summary of the information we've shared?
Yeah, we had a really cool one where, again, large environment, and the customer was able to update, kind of their provisioning process to use GP3. And we thought that result they got was really cool. They ended up adding in, more than a petabyte of storage into this environment while realizing a net decrease in their monthly cost. So increased the capacity by more than a petabyte, and then they ended up actually spending less on a monthly basis just by moving over to GP3. So very cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think similar with kind of my customers, that we just see that their unit cost is going down, but their spend is going up. So that's kind of going off the same thing. But it's nice to be able to see that they're moving to GP3 and that unit cost, which is their usage over time, is going down. And that's really powerful message to say you're using the cloud kind of correctly. And so one more thing I wanted to shout out before we do a kind of summary of what we've spoken about today is the cloud intelligence dashboards. There's a specific KPI dashboard. So this is the links and links we've shared are from the well-architected labs. These are a series of labs in which you can do the step-by-step guides to allow you to set things up in your accounts. One of them is a cloud intelligence dashboard. Really, really useful. Can't shout out enough. But there's a new KPI one. And in there is an option to set how much of your account you want to be GP2 to GP3. And this really lets you track this. So if you want to dive into this world of moving to GP3, you're not sure how to keep track of who's making the changes, what savings have I made, how's it going, then the KPI dashboard is the place to do it. So we've got a slide that we'll just spin up here to kind of walk through. So John, do you want to just give us the high level points, and then we'll leave everyone to enjoy the rest of their day at the San Francisco Summit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a little comparison here between our GP2 and GP3 volumes. Again, the big takeaway is that we've decoupled performance from capacity with the GP3s. There's a higher amount of baseline performance with the GP3s. And the other important distinction to think about here is that with GP2, the performance scales linearly with the capacity. As we add more capacity, we get more performance. GP3, we're going to have higher baseline performance, and we can add on additional capacity with our additional performance without modifying the capacity itself. So add more IOPS, add more throughput, and pay attention to really the one detail on here is looking at some of those throughput considerations. If you do have a really throughput intensive workload, you can kind of back into the numbers on this to see what's the right fit for your GP3 volume.
Fab. And then high performance, low cost. Says it all.
Yeah, that says it all, exactly. And then that's got that call out too to kind of help qualify and get you started. You know, those 1 terabyte volumes are going to be 20% cheaper and have the same random performance. You can scale that volume up to 16,000 IOPS. And then you're going to get that performance increase for any of those smaller volumes where now you're going to have a higher amount of baseline. So it's a good example up here. If you've got any of those smaller boot volumes, 32 gigs, your volume will actually be less money and you're going to get a 30x increase in the amount of IOPS that you get. So saving money and improving performance with any of those types of use cases.
Love it. What a great place to finish on. So we challenge you to go and look at that today. And like I said, if anyone's interested in watching more of us chat away and me and my other co-hosts talk all about optimizations, or if you do this, if you see us talking today and you go off and do this GP3 work, like let us know. Come on the show and tell us how you did it. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you everyone for watching, and have a great day. And we'll hopefully see you on our show. Bye.